Ziye, who was living in a third-rate university, collapsed into a sinkhole due to the sinkhole incident and appeared in a terrifying unknown forest. In this forest, there were various terrifying mutations, starting from his hands keywords of the novel. Divine and Demon Farming No pop-ups. Download the complete collection of Divine and Demon Farming TXT, and read the latest chapters of Divine and Demon Farming. Chapter 1. School Disaster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 School Disaster. Ziye lay listlessly on the desk, listening to his news reports with earphones in his ears. There was a small radio in the drawer of the desk. Ziye was greatly influenced by his grandfather and had nothing to do on weekdays. He became obsessed with the habit of listening to radio reports on news. Professor Ma, who was teaching Deng Luan in the classroom, was speaking fluently in gesturing, but unfortunately, there were not many people listening attentively below. This made Professor Ma secretly marvel at a group of decayed wood that cannot be carved. The time is around 2.45 minutes in the afternoon, which is the time for the first class in the afternoon. The location is AJ Vocational and Technical College, a fourth or fifth-rate university that doesn't even count as third-rate. The class is Computer Science Class 2, with a total of 27 students. Ziye changed her sleeping position to make herself more comfortable lying on her stomach, and also glanced around. My desk mate and close friend Zhang Zhongmo had already let out a slight snort, and the corners of his open mouth were already dripping with saliva. He also occasionally rolled his eyes slightly. This guy has a lot of problems after falling asleep. At the first 3 seats in the left row, the goddess Ning Yan in her dream was sitting quietly, listening attentively to the class. Ning Yan is widely recognized as the flower of the computer science department, and is the object of secret love and lust for Ziye and the vast majority of male students in this department. From Ziye's current position, one can only see Ning Yan's snowy jade-like neck, her jade-like skin, and her casually coiled hair, full of indescribable charm. Ziye swallowed his saliva and even felt a little less drowsy. The girl sitting at Ning Yan's desk suddenly turned around and glanced at Ziye, her eyes intersecting. The girl seemed to know what Ziye was looking at, and her eyes suddenly glared at him, with a clear murderous aura. Ziye quickly shrank his gaze, feeling a bit guilty of being a thief. The girl sitting next to Ning Yan and Ziye share the same surname, named Ziye. They live together, and Ziye not only have the same surname, but also have similar names. They played together since childhood. Coincidentally, the two of them attended the same kindergarten, primary and secondary schools, and even got into the same university in class. The two of them can also be considered childhood sweethearts. Normally, their relationship should be close to their siblings, but in fact, they are exactly the opposite. They look at each other with displeasure. Ziye has a fiercer temperament than boys. When Ziye first met Ziye in college, he almost burst into tears. Why did he encounter this broom star again? Being stared at by Ziye lay back on the table, squinting his eyes and falling asleep, while listening to various news broadcasted in his earphones. Ziye didn't actually feel sleepy, he just couldn't muster the energy to listen to Professor Ma's lecture. For him, it was far less interesting than listening to the news. Recently, frequent occurrences of sinkholes in various regions have attracted attention. According to recent news, around 10:35 a.m. this morning, 3 consecutive sinkholes were suddenly seen on the northern section of Renmin Road, with the largest sinkhole having a diameter of more than 15 meters. A Jinhua supermarket was engulfed by the sinkhole and nearly half of the 3 people went missing. The rescue work is currently underway, and experts predict. The earphones are broadcasting news about sinkholes, and in recent days, there have been news about sinkholes around the world. These sinkholes appear without any signs, among which the most terrifying is the appearance of a supergiant sinkhole with a diameter of over 1 kilometer in the center of a small foreign city, almost devouring half of this small city. The Tianqing incident has caused panic among many people, and some have even linked it to the prediction of the end of the world in 2012. Although some experts and professors have debunked the rumors, believing that it is only a natural geological phenomenon, it cannot suppress this panic. Ziye listened to the news reports on the radio in his ear. Although the sinkhole was terrifying, it seemed so far away for Ziye at the moment. He thought more about how to get along with Ning Yan, what to eat for dinner, how to update several chapters of a fantasy novel he was reading tonight, and when the Diablo 3 game would come out suddenly, there was a loud bang, followed by a continuous rumbling sound from below the teaching building, shaking violently around. Sleeping, reading novels, texting and chatting on mobile QQ, everyone looked up, with some showing shock and astonishment on their faces, and more people still looking confused. Professor Ma on stage forgot to close his mouth and suddenly seemed to think of something. Without saying a word, he escaped from the classroom at a speed no less than the sprint speed of a world sprint champion. Ziye was busy pulling off his earphones and looked up in shock. Zhang Zhongmo, the close friend beside him, was sleeping soundly. He was awakened by the shaking and thunderous sound, and woke up in a daze. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and said, "I was about to touch her thigh, why did it thunder? It's getting dark now." The rumbling sound and shaking only lasted for a few seconds before disappearing, and everything returned to normal. However, the outside sky suddenly became dark. What was that just now? An earthquake. It must be an earthquake, but why is it getting dark? Is it going to rain? The classmates finally woke up from the brief 1 or 2 seconds of stagnation just now, stood up one after another, and looked out the window. Many people were curious, and more had lingering palpitations on their faces. Outside, there was a buzzing noise everywhere, and obviously the shaking and loud noise of those few seconds caused a sensation throughout the entire college. Coughing. The sound of coughing came from the door. Professor Ma, who had previously seen the situation not going well and was the first to escape, walked back with a slightly unnatural expression and said, "It may be an earthquake. Just in case, the university should leave quickly and go to the playground. Don't stay on buildings or stand next to them." As soon as Professor Ma finished speaking, he was the first to slip away. It was fortunate that the earthquake had not caused the collapse of the teaching building in just a few seconds. If it happened again at this time, it might have happened. At this moment, the entire teaching building is noisy, and everyone is rushing out of the classroom, squeezing out in hopes of leaving the classroom early. What's wrong with this? Ziye squeezed out of the corridor and looked up at the sky. The sky was gloomy, with dark clouds piled up, and there was an indescribable upward pressure. Just now, the sky was clear for thousands of miles. Why did the teaching building shake and shake a few times before the sky changed? Looking down, I saw a constant stream of people rushing out of each building, forming several waves of people gathering towards the open playground. The school is just in case, asking everyone to evacuate the building and concentrate on the playground. Everywhere was a noisy crowd squeezing people, and Ziye was stuck in the corridor on the 3rd floor, unable to retreat. However, he remembered his close friend Zhang Zhongmo and the dream goddess Ning Yan in his heart. In this critical situation, it's a pity. Where is Ning Yan? Ziye thought beautifully, turning his head to look around, but couldn't see where Ning Yan was. As more and more people rushed out of the teaching building, the crowd became less crowded. Ziye secretly regretted not seeing Ning Yan and missed the opportunity to perform well. Unfortunately, suddenly, screams of agony rang out in the distance. In 20.1 years, growing so big, Ziye had heard such a piercing scream for the first time with his own ears. The sound was like a sharp iron nail, piercing directly into a person's head and soul, sounding eerie. Not only Ziye, but everyone who could hear this voice looked at the place where the screams came out with unchanged colors. Ziye remembers clearly that it was the school gate. This is an unremarkable university with a relatively small area, consisting of only 3 teaching buildings, 2 dormitory buildings, as well as a library, cafeteria, snack bar, playground, etc. The facilities are very poor, and the school gate is not far from the teaching building. Just as I thought about what was there, a second scream of fear followed closely. Ziye instinctively thought that when there were 2 on-duty security guards in the guard room next to the school gate, he was standing tall next to the corridor on the 3rd floor, and saw what he couldn't believe in his eyes the most in his life. A group of green-skinned, naked monsters, only 13 or 14-year-old children, rushed in from the school gate. Ziye has good eyesight and can see these monsters clearly. They have huge eyes, sunken noses, a big mouth with a blood basin, and are all green. They hold a wooden stick that looks like a baseball bat in their hand. Ziye couldn't believe his own eyes. Around him, everyone showed the same behavior as him, staring wide. In that moment, almost everyone was dumbfounded, with a momentary brain short-circuit. First, the teaching building shook and shook, making a rumbling sound. A few seconds later, the sky became dark, followed by screams, and then a group of monsters emerged. Doesn't all of this seem like a dream? Some even woke up and twisted their arms to see if they were dreaming. This group of about a dozen green-skinned monsters with wooden sticks were moving rapidly towards the playground where a large number of students were gathered. Most people were stunned, while a few reacted with a scream of fear and began to flee around. Shit! On the 3rd floor, Ziye could see very clearly. He saw the fastest charging green-skinned monster waving its big stick with terrifying speed and strength, hitting the head of a student who was standing there with glasses and looked somewhat stunned. Then, the head shattered and blood splattered out like cherry blossoms, mixed with white brain tissue. Isn't the skull the hardest thing? Why does it break so easily? At that moment, a strange idea came to Ziye's mind, and then he thought of this group of green-skinned monsters, very similar to the Galingbu in many of the games he played. Those monsters in the game, Galingbu, are just such green-skinned little ghosts. As the first person fell, this group of green-skinned monsters had already rushed into the crowd, almost one by one. Those frightened students who didn't know how to escape were all hit and fell to the ground, their heads blossoming. The glaring blood and bloody layers made the students standing on the teaching building vomit one after another. On the playground, there was already an immense panic, and students were like headless flies, screaming and running around. Hurry up, call 110 quickly. Finally, someone reacted and screamed frantically, thinking of dialing the police number while running away. At this moment, Ziye also woke up. Fortunately, he often helped his mother with household chores such as killing chickens and cutting fish. Perhaps he was used to seeing blood, but unexpectedly, although the scene below was bloody, he did not vomit. Just like the vast majority of people, he immediately thought of calling the police for help. I took out my phone and realized that there was not even a single signal on it. Some people were frantically dialing and calling, but couldn't get through at all. Ah, charge up, they charge up. Suddenly, someone in front screamed in fear. Ziye looked down and saw a green-skinned monster rushing into the crowd. Suddenly, it rushed into the teaching building, and then screamed from inside. The crowd around suddenly became panicked, some instinctively fled towards higher floors, while others were so scared that they didn't even care how many floors there were before jumping down. Quick, everyone, hurry back to the classroom, suddenly a woman's voice shouted hoarsely. Ziye looked at it with a cold heart, but saw a female student wearing a dress and glasses calling out. Ziye recognized it as the class monitor Lei Rui. Everyone was in a state of panic. Upon hearing Lei Rui's cry, they immediately woke up and fled back to their classroom. Ziye also hurriedly ran back, hardly needing anyone to teach him, and hurriedly closed the windows and front and rear doors. Hurry up, move the table over and block the door. Although Lei Rui appears gentle, she has demonstrated considerable commanding ability at this critical moment. Ziye and several male classmates moved the table and blocked the door together. The vast majority of the students who escaped were from their own class, as well as a few from other classes. Suyu looked around and saw that Suyu and Ningyan were both there, but his close friend Zhang Zhongmo was not here. In just the blink of an eye, everyone in the corridor outside the third floor fled cleanly, either into their own classroom like Suyu and others, or to higher floors, or impulsively jumped down the stairs, trying to find as many places to escape as possible, unlike being blocked in this building. Suyu and several male classmates pushed several desks together, blocking the front door. The screams coming from outside were getting closer and closer in their ears. These young boys and girls in their early 20s were all full of fear, and for the first time, they felt how close death was. A few more girls hugged each other, crying softly. Their legs were so scared that they fell to the ground and couldn't even stand up. Suyu, will we die? Suddenly, Suyu felt someone holding onto the corner of his clothes. Turning around, I realized it was Suyu. On weekdays, Suyu would argue as soon as they met, but at this moment, they no longer have this mood. Suyu saw the fearful expression in Suyu's eyes for the first time and felt an inexplicable feeling. He turned his head and said in a bitter voice, "I don't know, there are so many of us." Nothing. I swallowed the words below, only because there was a loud bang from the outside door, as if it had been hit by something huge. Suyu and 4 or 5 boys almost flew backwards along with a few desks. "Quick! Block it!" The class monitor Lei Rui screamed and rushed forward. Suyu felt a tightness behind her, but Lei Rui pressed against her, pushing forward with all her might. The originally stunning movements were ignored by no one in this situation. Suyu gritted his teeth and pushed the door tightly, suddenly turning his head and shouting, "Not good." With a crisp sound, a wooden stick hit the window glass on one side, and the glass immediately shattered into countless pieces, causing it to fly. A green skin and a ferocious face appeared outside the window like the legendary ghost. As we got closer, we could see more clearly the rich expressions and terrifying evil look on the face of this green monster, which made people shiver at a glance. "There are also students in other classes, hurry up and find them. Why are you only looking for us?" A girl suddenly screamed wildly in extreme fear. "I don't want it, I don't want my head to be smashed." Someone screamed in fear as they saw the green-skinned monster holding a wooden stick continuously smashing the window and quickly crawling in. In fear, they suddenly opened the other window and jumped out. Outside the window on the other side, it's not the hallway. If you jump out, you'll fall directly. This classroom is on the 3rd floor. With this jump, Suyu could clearly hear a mournful scream. "Monster!" One of the boys suddenly let out a loud scream, picked up a table, and smashed it towards the window. The green-skinned monster had just reached out half of its head from the window when it was hit. Their 4th-rate university, with poor facilities and all desks and chairs not fixed, came in handy. Suyu turned his head and recognized the boy named Chin Jague, who was the sports committee member of his class. He played basketball extremely well and was tall and handsome. He had many fans in school. His girlfriend is the class flower of the computer department class next door. I heard that he once pursued Ning Yan, but he didn't succeed. He retired and became the top student in a class. The two of them had already lived together, and Suyu and a group of other boys, many of whom were envious. Chin Jague truly deserves to be a sports commissioner. His strength is not small, and he even lifted a table and threw it out. Unfortunately, this green-skinned monster had just inserted its head halfway in, but when it saw something wrong, it shrank back and didn't hit it hard in one go. Suyu saw it, but with a clever move, he quickly grabbed a chair and shouted, "Use a chair." Chin Jague woke up and also picked up a chair. When the monster reached its head in, it hit it again. The green-skin monster has a relatively short stature and can penetrate through the iron window divided into 3 compartments. However, every time it has just penetrated half of its head, it is hit by Chin Jague with a chair, and it has tried 3 times without success. The others saw Qin Jiague holding on, and their spirits were boosted. The boys all picked up a chair. This green-skinned monster didn't even succeed in 3 attempts, and instead, on the last attempt, it was smashed on the scalp by Qin Jiague, emitting a trace of green juice like blood. The monster seemed angry, took a few steps back, suddenly opened its mouth and let out a sharp howl. Then it stood in the hallway, staring through the window at the people inside, with a fierce and terrifying expression on its face. What is it doing? Why isn't it moving? A girl next to her couldn't help but wonder and ask Qin Jiague. Qin Jiague shook his head, feeling somewhat puzzled. Suyu pondered slightly and suddenly understood. His face changed drastically and he said, "It's calling for a helper, not good." As soon as the words fell, there were already several sharp whistles outside, like ancient monsters. Following closely behind, the door of the classroom was hit with a loud bang. This green-skinned monster has immense power, causing the door to immediately shake and shake. The classroom was filled with fear, and if they were to rush in, everyone would die here. New book upload, requires support, both recommended tickets and favorites are required, end of this chapter. Chapter 2. Evolutionary Forces. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Evolutionary Forces, quick, block the door. Leroy screamed and rushed up first. Soon, everyone rushed forward and blocked the 2 doors tightly. In addition to the 2 who were knocking at the door, everyone saw 2 more monsters outside the corridor, along with the one that had previously been skinned, totaling 3 monsters, bombarding the window, shattering the glass, and trying to sneak in. One person guarding a window. Qin Jiague exclaimed, gripping the chair tightly with both hands. As soon as the green-skinned monster penetrated a little, it would crash onto it. Suyu also held a chair and guarded a window, smashing it twice, only to find that his hands were tingling. Looking at Qin Jiague and another boy, both of them were sweating profusely, and everyone couldn't support him for long. The 2 doors were also shaken by the bombardment, and fine cracks gradually appeared on them, making the situation increasingly dangerous. No, we can't support it anymore. There are 5 monsters outside, it's over, we're all over. Suyu muttered, rushing into a dozen or so green-skinned monsters. Surprisingly, 5 of them rushed out of their classroom, unsure whether it was their honor or their fate. As Suyu watched the green-skinned monster in front of him, each time it had just penetrated half of its head and hit itself, the other person recoiled in vain. Suddenly, a crazy idea came to Suyu's mind and he took a step back to the left. The green monster's big stick hit the iron window heavily, causing it to transform faintly. It tried again to crawl through one of the iron squares. This time Suyu didn't hit it again, instead he rested on the side as if tired. Soon, the head of the green-skinned monster completely penetrated inside. Suyu. Qin Jiague accidentally turned his head and saw it, exclaiming in shock, "Hurry up, it's crawling in." "It's okay." Suyu took a few breaths and saw the monster sneak in half of its body in the blink of an eye. Qin Jiague was so scared that his hands and feet were weak. If this powerful monster were allowed to sneak in, they would all be ruined. As soon as Qin Jiague took a breath, he turned around to help Suyu smash the monster that had just crawled in. Suddenly, Suyu grinned and said, "It's time." Grasping onto the chair with both hands, he exerted all his strength and slammed heavily at the monster and the iron window that had just crawled in half. With a loud bang, Suyu's hands were numb from the shock. He vaguely felt that the tiger's mouth might have cracked, but he didn't care about life or death. Suyu went crazy and smashed at this monster. Qin Jiague suddenly stared blankly and then suddenly realized. Previously, the monster only nodded in and they were in a hurry to smash it out of fear. As a result, they wasted all their strength and could not cause any damage to the monster. Suyu waited for it to crawl in half before smashing it. The monster's body was originally slightly smaller than the iron grid, but with this smashing, it happened to be stuck in the iron window grid, unable to move forward or backward, and could only tie up their hands and be stuck there, allowing them to bombard it. Ziye went crazy and kept throwing at the monster, splashing green juice. The monster let out a terrifying scream in its mouth, and the wooden stick in its hand fell off. Although it had infinite strength, its body was still flesh and blood, and it was frantically smashed by Ziye as he swung his chair. Soon, its breath was weak and it crawled softly into the iron window, losing its energy to move and struggle. Die, monster! Ziye escaped as if in a state of collapse, and the last chair fell down with a crisp, click sound. The chair shattered and the monster's head shattered. Then, Ziye saw with his own eyes that a shiny black, crystal-like substance appeared from the shattered head of the monster. As soon as this thing appeared, it let out a whoosh and flew into Ziye's closest left palm, then miraculously merged into his left palm and disappeared. Ziye saw all of this in his eyes and was startled. He couldn't help but step back and look at his left hand, but there was nothing. Did he just feel dizzy? Looking up, he saw that Ziye had received his reminder, just like him. He waited for this green-skinned monster to squeeze in half of his body before smashing it down. Unexpectedly, this green-skinned monster released its wooden stick and grabbed the iron window with both hands. It was hit hard by Ziye, pulled with both hands and kicked with both feet, and rushed into the classroom through the iron window. At that moment, Ziye realized that it was not his intelligence that had just killed the green-skinned monster, but that the green-skinned monster had been too unlucky for him. The iron window had already been twisted and deformed by its impact, with his upper body squeezing in, but his lower body getting stuck and unable to move, which allowed him to find a big advantage. A green-skinned monster suddenly rushed in, and the whole classroom was filled with loud screams. Several female students who were huddled together were already so scared that their legs shook and they couldn't urinate. Ziye fell back out of fear and fell to the ground. This green-skinned monster seemed to hate Ziye so much that it didn't even pick up the wooden stick on the ground. With its claws extended, it grabbed towards Ziye's face, door, and chest on the ground. With the terrifying power of this monster, it can easily scratch the head of the Qin family and even open its mouth and abdomen. At this moment, Ziye had just killed the green-skinned monster and turned his head to see Ziye in danger. Without much thought, he picked up a chair next to him and threw it into the air. With this move, Ziye suddenly felt something was wrong with his body. Just now, he flipped and smashed wildly. Although he was already exhausted and almost had no strength to lift a little finger, he didn't expect that at this critical moment, when he reached out and lifted it, he effortlessly threw a chair out. But the most astonishing thing was that after the chair was thrown out, it made a whoosh sound in the air, with speed and strength beyond imagination. Ziye turned his head in shock and felt that the power he had just exerted was coming from his left hand, a force that was definitely not what he should have had. As he turned his head, he could clearly see black flesh scales about half the size of a fingernail on the back of his left palm. With a loud bang, the chair flew out of the air and hit the green-skinned monster on Ziye, who had just fallen to the ground. Green juice splashed up, the chair scattered, and the green-skinned monster screamed and flew out horizontally. At that moment, Ziye suddenly remembered the small black crystal that had popped out of his shattered head when he had just killed the green-skinned monster. It had flown into his left palm and disappeared. Is it all related to that crystal? Ziye unconsciously released his left palm, and the strange force dissipated automatically. The small black flesh scale on his left back disappeared, and his left palm returned to normal. His limbs became soft, especially if he had lost strength. All of this seemed real and illusory, and the only thing that could be truly certain was that the green-skinned monster that had just been thrown away by him flipped over and crawled up, emitting a hoarse howl in its mouth. Its eyes glared at Ziye, with a deep hatred emanating from it. It snatched the wooden stick it had just lost on the ground and charged towards Ziye. With a chill in his heart, Ziye quickly reached out his left hand again, grabbed the wooden table next to him, and lifted it. The abnormal force in the left arm reappeared, causing the wooden table to fly horizontally. The green skin monster's stick hit the wooden table with a loud bang, causing the table to shatter and fragments to splash out. Ziye groaned and suddenly felt a sharp pain in her chest and abdomen. She let out a scream and fell. The whole classroom was in chaos, with Lei Rui and others blocking the door, a few girls huddled together and crying. Two boys stood in front of a window, frantically tapping the green-skinned monster outside that was constantly trying to stick its head in. Qin Jiague fell to the ground, while another green-skinned monster was holding a wooden stick and making a strange hissing sound, rushing towards Ziye who had just fallen to the ground. Suddenly, Ziye, who was full of fear, let out a scream and rushed out. Her face was covered in tears, and most of the girls present were frightened and crying. Su Yuming was also afraid and fearful, but when she saw that Ziye might have been beaten in the head by this green-skinned monster, she suddenly lost her sense of reason and rushed out with a crazy shout. Ziye, who fell to the ground, felt a sharp pain in his abdomen and was covered in blood. In an instant, he realized that the wooden table had just been smashed by the green-skinned monster, and one of the fragments flew and pierced his abdomen. Will I die? Ziye had a strange idea and fell to the ground. He could clearly see the green-skinned monster rushing down from above, swinging the huge wooden stick. Then, he saw Ziye with tears all over her face, rushing up from behind like a madman. No, don't. Ziye saw the other hand of the green-skinned monster swing back, and Ziye rushed forward frantically. This one could just tear open Ziye's chest. New books require support. If you think it's good, vote for recommendations if you have votes. Hehe, it would be even better if you could collect it. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Black Scales. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Black Scales, Monster. Ziye screamed frantically, not knowing where the strength came from. He curled up his feet and kicked it up, right on the body of the green-skinned monster that was pouncing. With both hands extended, he saw it clearly and grabbed the wooden stick that the green-skinned monster had swung down. Then, he let out a scream. Except for his left hand, he had no abnormal force in any other area. With a single kick, although he hit the green-skinned monster, he didn't want the opponent's momentum to be too strong. Instead, it made his legs tremble, almost as terrifying as if they were about to break. But the injury to his right hand was even more severe. As he grabbed the wooden stick with his left hand, Ziye could clearly hear the sound of bones breaking in his right hand. Conservatively estimated, at least 2 finger bones were also broken. 10 fingers connected to the heart, the finger bone broke, and the pain was unimaginable. Ziye screamed in pain, but tightly held onto the wooden stick. The black scales on his left back appeared again, and a strange force erupted. Ziye instinctively punched out. With a loud bang, green juice and blood mixed with a green bead burst out, and one of the eyeballs of this green-skinned monster was hit by terrifying force and jumped out of its socket. Ziye screamed wildly, grabbed his wooden stick with his backhand, held it in his hand, and then fiercely smashed it at the head of the green-skinned monster. The classmates in the classroom looked at Ziye as if they were dumbfounded at this moment. Qin Jiague had just climbed up half of his body from the ground when he saw Ziye, like a demon, covered in blood. Then he grabbed the wooden stick that originally belonged to the green-skinned monster with his left hand and threw it at its head. With a crisp sound, the head of the green-skinned monster shattered like a rotten watermelon, and the green juice splashed all over Ziye's hands and face. From this shattered head, another tiny black crystal-like object flew out and rushed into Ziye's left hand, merging into it at a speed that was almost impossible for the naked eye to keep up and disappearing. Ziye let go, threw away the wooden stick, and stumbled down. Ziye cried and rushed forward, shaking Ziye wildly, shouting, "Ziye, Ziye, wake up. I didn't expect Ziye to care so much about me." Ziye's mind was a bit dazed, and a thought suddenly came to her mind. Then she heard a loud bang, and several male and female classmates exclaimed in terror. Suyu's heart trembled and he regained consciousness. I saw Lei Xian and a few others falling to the ground, and the originally stacked desks also collapsed. The front door of the classroom fell to the ground. Finally, the front door was smashed and collapsed, and the other two green-skinned monsters stopped smashing the window and back door. They turned around and ran to the front door, along with the green-skinned monster that smashed open the front door. The three monsters slowly walked in. Two flesh and blood blurry green-skinned monsters were falling in this classroom, and it seemed that for this reason, these three monsters slowed down their speed, with some suspicion in their eyes, and then looked at Suyu together. It was Suyu who killed those two green-skinned monsters. At this moment, it seemed quiet outside, and the remaining dozen or so living people in the classroom only felt a gray before them. As three green-skinned monsters walked in, a sense of fear engulfed everyone's heart. A girl climbed up to the window on the other side and looked down at the third floor, her face full of fear. She waited for the monster to pounce, then gritted her teeth and jumped down. Jumping down from the third floor may not necessarily mean falling to death. Even if she fell and broke her hands and feet, it was better than getting her head smashed and dying. Some people keep pressing their phones and repeatedly dialing and calling the police, but there is no signal at all. A few more boys were trembling and huddled together, clutching tables and chairs, ready to fight to the death. When their fear reached its extreme, they didn't know what fear was. Some of them looked at the back door and wanted to open the desk in front of the door to escape, but they were afraid that their actions would attract the attention of monsters and they would be the first to be attacked. Step back. Suyu gritted his teeth, his right hand, abdomen, legs, and whole body were painful, and his face twisted with pain. He gritted his teeth and extended his left hand to pull Suyu behind him. Suyu panicked and fell back, directly falling out. She felt that Suyu's left hand was surprisingly strong, and with just one pull, it was pulled out and thrown out. Ah! Suyu fell to the ground and screamed in pain. The three monsters launched attacks almost simultaneously, but they all split into three paths and attacked Suyu together. Run away quickly. The other classmates saw the situation, and several of them immediately shouted wildly. They didn't care about Suyu and took the opportunity to flee. Among them, only Qin Jiague let out a furious shout, grabbed a chair on one side, and threw it at the three monsters. Class monitor Lei Rui struggled all over her face, looking anxiously at Suyu and at the door. She was equally afraid and wanted to escape, but instinctively felt that she should not leave Suyu behind. They were able to escape, and this opportunity was also created by Suyu for them. Watching three monsters pounce at the same time, Suyu's mind surged with fear. With a stretch of his left hand, he grabbed the wooden stick he had snatched from the previous green-skinned monster. With this grip of the left hand, a powerful force immediately surged out, and this time the supernatural force was much stronger than before. On the back of Suyu's left palm, two black flesh scales about half the size of a nail cap protruded. Is this because he killed two green-skinned monsters and absorbed two crystals? Suyu's heart inexplicably moved, but he turned around and fled to the other side. He extended his left wooden stick towards the bottom of one of the tables and swung it heavily. The supernatural force erupted, and the table flew up and smashed out. Two of the green-skinned monsters stopped and swung their sticks to block, while the other green-skinned monster circled and pounced on Suyu. Suddenly, Suyu realized that the green-skinned monster was not smart. Perhaps it was because he had an incredible power in his left hand, or perhaps it was because he had already killed two green-skinned monsters, or perhaps Suyu had a natural instinct for such combat. In short, at this moment, his mind was spinning incredibly fast, and he couldn't even believe that he was the Suyu who often hung red lights, passed exams, and was considered useless by the teacher. Three green-skinned monsters rushed towards him together, and Suyu had no choice but to escape. However, after he threw a wooden table, two of them stopped and blocked the table hard, while the other one jumped around and rushed towards him. In that moment, an opportunity appeared, perhaps 1 or 2 seconds, maybe 3 or 4 seconds, at least in front of him, becoming Su Yu's only chance to face this green-skinned monster. The opportunity was not lost, and Su Yu took the initiative to meet him. His left arm had a powerful ability, and he vaguely felt as if his power had surpassed that of the green-skinned monster. With a loud bang, 2 wooden sticks intersected, causing a huge pain in the left arm. However, this green-skinned monster was even more miserable, with its tiger mouth cracking and the wooden stick flying out of its grasp. A hint of shock and fear appeared on its ghost face. Su Yu never missed the opportunity, enduring the excruciating pain in his left arm as if it were broken, and wildly swung his stick to smash it. With a thud, the green-skinned monster let out a low and miserable howl from its mouth, its head shattered and flew out. One of the black crystals flew out, like a lightning bolt rushing into Su Yu's left hand. A new force immediately surged out of the already surging abnormal force, making it even greater. Looking at the back of the left palm, a little black scale appeared on it, but this time only a small piece of black scale appeared, much smaller than the previous 2. What's going on? Is it because this green-skinned monster has poor strength, or is this black crystal absorbing too much and its effect deteriorating? Strange thoughts came to Su Yu's mind, and 2 other green-skinned monsters had already rushed towards him with crazy howls. This time, Su Yu's reaction was delayed. Although he shook one of the green-skinned monsters with a stick and threw it out, he was hit by another green-skinned monster with a stick. In danger, Su Yu instinctively extended his right arm. With a thud, the stick hit his right arm, and Su Yu screamed in agony. His right arm snapped, thanks to the fact that the wooden stick in his left hand collided with the stick of another green-skinned monster. Although the green-skinned monster was shaken and fell out, he also took several steps back, which prevented his right arm from fully hitting the ground due to his backward posture. Otherwise, if this stick goes down, the right arm will immediately turn into a ball of meat sauce, and now fortunately, it's just a broken arm bone. Su Yu screamed in agony, and this green-skinned monster saw the opportunity and immediately rushed forward crazily, raising its baton with both hands, ready to kill Su Yu. With a wave of his left arm, Su Yu let out a scream in excruciating pain as his right arm was broken. He threw the wooden stick in his hand head-on and then threw it out. This sudden outbreak of power was incredibly terrifying. The wooden stick suddenly collided with the green-skinned monster's wooden stick, and Su Yu threw it out again, crushing the green-skinned monster under his body. The chest was in excruciating pain, and the monster reached out and tore off a piece of flesh and blood. Su Yu's left fist hit it at the same moment. The green-clothed monster made a couple of gulps in its mouth, but Su Yu smashed its face with a punch, and the 4th crystal was sucked into its palm. Finally, a 3rd complete black scale emerged. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. A New Day. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. A New Day. After killing 4 green-skinned monsters, Su Yu felt as if he had collapsed all over. Although there was a surge of abnormal force in his left arm, the rest of the area was so painful that he almost lost consciousness. Except for one left arm, Su Yu could no longer feel any other part of his body. Crawling down to the ground, I heard a heavy gasp in my ears and barely looked up. However, I saw Qin Jiague holding a wooden stick with both hands, sweating profusely, and a green-skinned monster with a cracked brain lying on the ground in front of him. This is the last green-skinned monster that was just swung upside down by Su Yu, and Qin Jiague had already picked up a wooden stick in his hand. Seeing the opportunity, he frantically threw it at its head and finally solved it. At this moment, Qin Jiague was staring blankly at his right hand. There was also a strange situation on the back of his right hand, but it was not a protruding black flesh scale like Su Yu, but a small black hard lump. At first glance, it looked like a sudden addition of a black mole. Touching it with his hand, it was as cold as steel. When he released his right hand, this strange situation disappeared again. Suyu gave Chinjague a grateful glance. If it weren't for him killing the last green-skinned monster, he was afraid that after killing 4 green-skinned monsters, he would also die in the hands of this 5th monster. In the entire classroom, only Suyu who had fallen to the ground, Chinjague who was standing, Suyu who had just risen, and the class monitor Lei Rui who was standing by the door were left. Other places are in chaos. Suyu got up and pounced on the ground. Looking at Suyu's miserable situation on the ground, his heart trembled and he said in a trembling voice, Suyu, how are you doing? Suyu lifted half of his head slightly and looked at the corpses of the 5 green-skinned monsters in front of him. He suddenly had a big dream and smiled bitterly. I can't move. It hurts so much. I'm almost unconscious, but Suyu, I didn't expect. You would care so much about me. Do you like me? If you like me, just say so. Suyu was taken aback and instinctively slapped Suyu hard on the back of the head, angrily saying, Who? Then he was surprised because with this slap, Suyu completely fainted. Chinjague occasionally shook his right hand and then released it, feeling the fluctuation of the strange force in his right hand. He murmured, I know, no wonder Suyu became so fierce. After killing these monsters, he could obtain unimaginable power. On his face, there was an instinctive hint of excitement after being overly nervous. When Suyu regained consciousness, he was lying on the hospital bed in the infirmary. During the Zhou dynasty, there were noisy voices everywhere. The original beds were not enough, but many beds were temporarily added here. You can easily see many injured people wrapped in white-brown. Thinking of his injuries, Suyu lowered his head and immediately realized that he was probably the most tightly wrapped among all of them. Except for one left arm, everything else was injured and I couldn't move even if I wanted to. Suyu woke up. A voice filled with surprise exclaimed, and then familiar faces such as Suyu and Lei Rui appeared. Suyu. Another sweet voice rang out. Suyu looked up slightly and saw a woman with fair and creamy skin. This woman is around 20.6 or 17 years old, with long hair draped over her shoulders, wearing a black half-length dress, and a belt tied around her waist, fully showcasing her plump and seductive body, especially her slender thighs, which are very disappointing. Teacher Meng, Suyu spoke out, only to realize that his throat was hoarse and he was also startled. This plump and mature beauty, surnamed Meng Mingbo, is the counselor of their current computer class 2 and also teaches them college English. Although she has a boyfriend, she has not yet gotten married and is the dream lover of many boys. She is the object of imagination when drawing maps at night. You are very brave, and the teacher never imagined that you could kill 4 green. That monster alone. When mentioning the green skin monster, Teacher Meng Bo's face also changed slightly, showing a lingering expression of fear. Suyu suddenly remembered that there were at least 15 or 16 green-skinned monsters rushing into the campus at that time, and quickly said, What about the other monsters? How is the situation now? What about Zhang Zhongmo? I wanted to ask about Ning Yan's situation again, but suddenly I saw Suyu beside me and for some reason, I didn't dare to ask. Master Yu, where have your eyes gone? I'm lying next to you. Are you only looking at beautiful women in your eyes? You can't even see me, brother. Suddenly, someone beside me groaned. Suyu turned his head in shock and realized that there was an injured person lying next door in clinical practice, with half of his face covered in white cloth. Upon closer inspection, it was not his close friend Zhang Zhongmo or anyone else. Suyu breathed a sigh of relief, although it seemed that Zhang Zhongmo was also injured quite lightly, as long as he didn't die. Meng Bo said, There are a total of 17, all of them have been killed. Suyu, please take good care of yourself. Everyone, go out and don't disturb them. Yes, Lei Rui responded, glanced at Suyu with a concerned expression, and suddenly said, Suyu, thank you. Suyu was taken aback and couldn't believe that this usually arrogant top student who didn't even consider him would say thank you to such a poor student. What's wrong, class monitor? Suyu was somewhat surprised. I am thanking you on behalf of the whole class. At that time, if it weren't for you, we would all have died. You saved us. Leroy was suddenly a bit embarrassed when he called her class monitor. She realized her previous bad attitude towards Suyu and awkwardly pulled Suyu out. Suyu turned around and glanced at Suyu, as if wanting to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. Instead, she said to Zhang Zhongmo on the other side, take good care of yourself. Zhang Zhongmo said strangely, Miss Suyu has changed her temperament. She actually knows how to care about people. Young master Yu, do you think it's strange? Suyu let out a muffled groan and felt excruciating pain all over his body. After thinking for a while, he said, I've been unconscious for a while and woke up here. What's going on outside now? Has the police arrived? Have we found out what those monster-like things are? Can't they be mutated animals from some zoo? Or were they created by some perverted scientist using something? Police. Zhang Zhongmo's face darkened as he said, no, everyone's phones have no signal, and even the school's landline phone cannot be reached. This time, I'm afraid hundreds of people have died. Now the bodies are still piled up outside, and the school seems to have a dispute over how to handle them. Suyu felt a chill in his heart and then a surge of anger surged, saying, can't you personally go find it if the phone can't be reached? The police station is not far from our school, and what's happening here is so serious that no one cares. This. Excited, he touched the wound and took 2 breaths of cold air in pain. In fact, theoretically speaking, so many people were injured that they should have been transferred to the big hospital in the city long ago. Now, they are crowded in the medical room of the school. The medical facilities here are rudimentary, and only simple bandages can be performed. At this moment, there are moans and screams of severely injured patients everywhere. Suyu was already a bit angry, wondering if the school still wanted to conceal it. No, with so many deaths, can we keep it hidden? No, it doesn't matter. It is. It is now. Zhang Zhongmo's face showed a hint of strangeness. Does anyone know where we are now? Suyu was stunned for a moment. What do you mean? Old strategist, no one knows where we are. Aren't we at school? Isn't this the school's medical department? Zhang Zhongmo smiled bitterly and said, listen to me. This thing. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have almost thought I was dreaming. Outside our school, everything has changed, it's all trees. Damn it, it's so strange. Our school has run into the forest. Ah. Suyu didn't react for a moment and said, forest, what forest? Outside our school. It's no longer the scenery we usually see. There are no roads, no residential areas, no Tianyuan internet cafe we often go to, no billiards room. Now all around are endless forests, all towering trees. Zhang Zhongmo's voice became more peculiar as he spoke, and in the end, his own tone almost changed. This kind of thing would be unbelievable to anyone, and Suyu was stunned when he heard it. He almost thought he had heard it wrong for a moment, and then turned his head to look at the other injured patients. He said to one of the girls, is everything he said true? The girl had a face full of fear and nodded, unable to speak. Has the outside of the school turned into a forest? What is this? Is it a science fiction movie? Or Hollywood blockbusters? Su Yugong wanted to laugh, thinking that Zhang Zhongmo must have tricked them into playing with him. Suddenly, Suyu suddenly remembered the loud noise and violent shaking in the school before the incident, and then the sky became dark. At that time, he had a faint feeling, as if the sky had suddenly changed. Another day. Suyu gasped for air and suddenly felt a chill all over her body. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Advanced Team. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Advanced Team. Turning his head, he stared intently at Zhang Zhongmo, and a few words popped out of Su Yu's teeth. Really? Zhang Zhongmo nodded, with a strange and fearful expression in his eyes. Sigh. Su Yu lay down calmly. At this moment, he felt as if his mind was about to explode. What had happened that day was too shocking and unimaginable, and the most shocking thing was that the surroundings of the school had changed. It was no longer the world they were familiar with, especially if they had come into a strange world they had never seen before. After lying down for a while, the door was pushed open and a few people walked in, including the class monitor Lei Rui and Su Yu. The two of them walked to the bedside of Su Yu and Zhang Zhongmo, holding lunch boxes in their hands. I'm starving to death, it's already dark outside, Zhang Zhongmo said as he sat up in bed. Although Su Yu can move his left hand, he cannot move his body and can only rely on others to feed him. Su Yu, come on, Lei Rui entrusted the task to Su Yu. Su Yu blushed, gritted her teeth, and sat aside with a soft snort, looking somewhat forced. Su Yu became angry and thought to herself that I had worked hard to save you, but you even looked reluctant to feed me. She snorted, I'm not hungry. She turned her head away. Su Yu was stunned, and Lei Rui seemed to see something. He took the lunch box from Su Yu's hand and smiled, saying, let me feed you, Su Yu. You should give me some face as the class leader. You are the hero of our class. I'm so hungry that no one can spare me. Everyone said they wanted to see you, but I stopped them. You're injured now and need rest the most. Lei Rui now looks at Su Yu, who has long lost the airs of the former class monitor, with a smile on her face, appearing cute and friendly. Su Yu's face also showed a smiling expression and said, my appetite suddenly improved. Ah, I just realized that my stomach is almost starving. He opened his mouth and took a bite of food. Seeing this, Su Yu was so angry that her teeth itched. She snorted and turned around. Lei Rui gave Su Yu a few bites, and her expression suddenly darkened. What's wrong, class monitor? Su Yu saw it with some curiosity. Lei Rui looked at the food in the lunchbox and sighed slightly, if no one comes to save us again, in 2 days, we won't even have enough food to eat, and this electricity. She looked up at the electric light in the room, her expression somewhat anxious. Fortunately, the school has a generator and it hasn't been powered off yet. Su Yu said somewhat strangely, even if it turns into a forest outside, hasn't the school organized people to go outside and explore the way? Outside. Lei Rui shuddered and whispered, they're all those green-skinned monsters. Fortunately, the walls outside our school are high enough and the iron gates are tightly closed, which temporarily blocked them. But we can't hold on long either. Su Yu's heart sank upon hearing this. The forest outside the school was filled with these green monsters. Looking around, everyone looked heavy and worried, with no longer the youthful vigor of a 20-year-old man. Now, a faint sense of despair and terror enveloped the room. That night, everyone spent in fear. Outside, various terrifying roars could be heard from time to time. Su Yu could tell that most of them were from those green-skinned monsters, but occasionally mixed with the roars of other creatures. This roar was even more terrifying and chilling. Lying in bed, Su Yu could clearly sense the slow flow of a strange force in his left arm, surging all over his body, as if changing his physique over and over again, causing him to sweat profusely. Su Yu's injury was very serious, with 3 broken finger bones and a broken bone in his right arm. The wound on his abdomen was quite deep, almost injuring his internal organs. Such an injury could make him lie in bed for half a month. But it was only one night, and it seemed like the special effect of that strange force. Su Yu felt that the injury had improved a lot and his right arm might have had a bone fracture, so his recovery was slower. Meanwhile, the skin and flesh injury in his abdomen had healed so much that he got out of bed and walked around without any problems. This is his new discovery, that extraordinary force not only makes his left-hand power terrifying, but also has a magical effect of accelerating the recovery of his body injuries. What exactly is this strange force, and what is the black scale like floating on the back of the left palm? Suyu couldn't figure it out clearly. Many things he was facing now went beyond common sense. Zhang Zhongmo's injuries were much milder than his. Except for his head still wrapped in gauze, everything else was just some skin injuries. After resting for a day, he was fine. At Suyu's request, he helped Suyu and slowly walked out of the medical office. As soon as you go outside, you can see the seemingly dark sky and the towering trees in the distance. Zhang Zhongmo did not deceive him. Outside the school now, it has indeed become a forest, a strange and terrifying forest full of monsters. Groups of male and female students with confused eyes can be seen in the surrounding area. When faced with such a big thing, the class naturally stopped. Although they are studying at a third or fourth-rate university, there are also nearly 2,000 students. At this moment, all of them are trapped here, and eating and drinking immediately become a top priority problem. As Lei Rui said, if this situation doesn't change, they won't have any food to eat in less than 2 days. And the forest outside, filled with green skin monsters, trapped them alive here. As long as it drags on for a few more days, without food, they will die without a place to bury themselves, and a sense of despair permeates everyone's heart. No, we have to go out, Suyu muttered to himself suddenly. Yes. There is a human interface behind it. Suyu turned around, and the counselor Meng Bo, with a tall figure, snowy skin, and a round face, walked over. We can't wait here to die. Are your injuries better? Come with me. The school leaders are looking for you. When Suyu and Zhang Zhongmo followed Meng Bo to the lobby of the cafeteria, there were already many people gathered inside, mostly men. Suyu saw familiar classmates Qin Jiegue and Ning Yan among them. Suyu, Zhang Zhongmo. Qin Jiegue greeted the two of them, and Suyu and the others nodded at him. Suyu took some time to quietly glance at Ning Yan, and saw her calmly standing on the side, her gaze restrained, not looking around. It's a bit strange that everyone is standing in the cafeteria. What's even more surprising is that there are a large number of students gathered by the door outside the cafeteria. At this moment, they are all looking east and west, but they don't come in. Everyone, sit down. A few middle-aged people stood at the top, and Suyu recognized that they were led by the school's Dean Zheng, while the other few were also school leaders. Suyu sat down in a chair with doubts, and Zhang Zhongmo sat next to him. Unexpectedly, the Qin family noble walked over and sat next to him. Although they were in the same class, Suyu and Zhang Zhongmo had an average relationship with Qin Jiegue, but unexpectedly he had become very close to them now. Everyone else also found a seat to sit down. Qin Jiegue, do you know what's going on? Suyu asked in a low voice. Qin Jiegue shook his right hand before whispering, Teacher Meng didn't tell you. Our group of people have been summoned here and will have important responsibilities. Suyu shook her head, and Dean Zheng above had already begun to speak. Suyu remembers that Zheng, the head of the court, was the most verbose official on weekdays. However, this time it was concise, and a few words helped Suyu and Zhang Zhongmo understand the reason. Originally, everyone was gathered here as an advance team to explore the unknown forest. The most ideal way is to contact the police or someone with the ability to rescue them, and once again, hope to find food and so on. Among the people gathered here, more than a dozen of them, like Suyu, have killed the green skin monster and possess special supernatural powers. Of course, only Suyu can kill 4 in a row, which makes Suyu particularly eye-catching among these people. Even Dean Zheng glanced at him a few times while speaking. There were a total of 17 green-skinned monsters, of which Suyu killed 4, another female student from the foreign language department killed 2, and the remaining 11 were each killed by 11 people. This means that a total of 13 people at the scene had special supernatural powers. What surprised Suyu the most was that the seemingly calm and weak Yu Yen also killed a green-skinned monster, becoming one of the 2 girls among the 13. Of course, Suyu knew that in that chaotic situation, whether or not to kill the green-skinned monster depended heavily on luck, such as himself and Chin Jague. Without the ability to absorb foreign objects, in terms of physical strength, Chin Jague was definitely much stronger than himself, but unfortunately, he was lucky. The green-skinned monster got stuck in the iron window grid and killed 1 monster, gaining supernatural power, which led to his record of killing 3 more monsters in a row. Upon this thought, Suyu also felt relieved. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Team of 31 people. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Team of 31 people. The matter of killing monsters and obtaining special powers is now clear to everyone. 13 people, including Suyu, were summoned together, while more than 10 people, although not possessing powers, were all physically strong. Among them were physical education teachers, school security guards, and members of the school team, all of whom declared themselves brave and willing to participate. Together, they reached about 30 people. But among the women, there were only Ning Yen and another girl from the foreign language department who killed 2 green-skinned monsters. Suyu quietly asked Chin Jague, but this guy actually knows a little bit about the other party's background. It is said that the girl's name is Ma Ziye, and she is somewhat famous in the foreign language department because her family runs a martial arts school. I think she has received family training and should have some martial arts background. After Ding Zheng finished speaking, the cafeteria staff provided them with abundant food for about 30 people. The saying goes that emperors are not inferior to hungry soldiers. This time, they went deep into the forest to explore for vitality and food sources, which can be said to be risking their lives. Before leaving, the school prepared a sumptuous breakfast for them. Meng Bo walked up to Suyu and whispered, "How are you doing with your injuries?" "Originally, I reported to Ding Zheng that you were seriously injured and did not include you in it. But just now, when I saw that you could wake up, I asked you to come too. How are you doing now?" Obviously, Suyu's heroic act of killing 4 green-skinned monsters in a row still shook the school. Although he understood that Suyu had been seriously injured, he still had high expectations for him. Suyu slightly moved his body. Although his right hand couldn't move yet, everything else was fine. He nodded and said, "It should be okay. The injury was not light yesterday, but it's much better today. It seems. The benefit of killing that monster is not only that it has increased strength, but also that its recovery has become terrifying. In my opinion, in another day, my injury will be almost healed." Meng Bo breathed a sigh of relief, a smile appeared on his face, and he let out a sigh. With Suyu, a master who kills 4 monsters in a row, Meng Bo's confidence greatly increases in the team. Before leaving, everyone was given a backpack, which contained 2 or 3 days of food, fresh water, some simple emergency supplies such as gauze, cotton balls, and hemostatic sticks, as well as flashlights, lighters, knives, etc., limited to 2 days. The school's requirement for them was to spend 2 days searching, and if there was nothing found within 2 days, they had to return. In fact, the food stored in the school is barely enough for 2 days. If Suyu and his team cannot find any other sources of food or rescue teams within 2 days, the school can only give up staying at the school. If they sit still and wait for death, they can only risk leaving here. Everything depends on the results of Suyu and his group searching in the forest in the past 2 days. The only plans that the school can currently think of are these. If they rashly give up the school, they can temporarily hold and enter the forest from the beginning. It can be imagined that many people will die. I hope we can find the rescuers within 2 days, and it would be even better if we could leave the forest, Zhang Zhongmo said, touching the half-wrapped face. Just now Suyu learned that Zhang Zhongmo had also killed a green-skinned monster, one of the 13 people with special powers. 17 green-skinned monsters died and left behind 17 wooden sticks. These sticks were very sturdy and even harder than solid iron sticks, about 1 meter long. When swung, their power was terrifying, and even small rocks could be easily shattered. Ziye was assigned a wooden stick like this as a weapon, as well as several security electric batons and other weapons, which were also distributed to everyone. If there was not enough, he used baseball bats, iron pipes, kitchen knives, and so on, ensuring that at least 30 of them had 1 or 2 self-defense weapons in their hands. However, in terms of power, the wooden stick used by this green-skinned monster is still the most terrifying. Coupled with the urgency of time, schools cannot find better destructive weapons. Although kitchen knives and the like are sharp, they are too short. If you really encounter a green-skinned monster holding a wooden stick again, they will not be of much use. Everything was ready, and a group of over 30 people rushed to the school gate, escorted by a group of male and female students with strange and fearful gazes. At this moment, the iron gate at the school gate has been tightly closed, and a group of people holding various self-defense weapons are standing guard inside the iron gate. Outside the iron gate, there were several wandering green-skinned monsters, occasionally making 1 or 2 howls at the people inside. However, the iron gate was extremely high and they tried many times but could not climb over or damage it. They gave up, but they kept wandering in front of the iron gate, feeling inexplicable despair and fear. Dean Zheng and several leaders, as well as a group of teachers and students, gathered at the iron gate to bid farewell. The green-skinned monsters wandering outside seemed to sense something and immediately let out sharp screams, waving wooden sticks in their hands. They immediately began to hit the iron gate again, causing it to make a roar sound. Everyone inside showed a look of both hatred and fear. Among them, class leaders Lei Rui and Ziye were both among the ones to bid farewell. Ziye couldn't help but laugh when he saw Ziye looking at him with a hesitant expression, saying, "Ziye, I think you care a lot about me. If you have anything to say, hurry up and say it." Ziye snorted and couldn't help but say, "You. Be careful yourself, don't try to show off your abilities." "Got it, don't worry, to be honest, Ziye, we've known each other for so long, and this is the first time I've noticed that you seem to be hiding something from me." Ziye said, Not really. It was your mother who asked me to watch over you, otherwise who cares about your life and death? Anyway, for your mother's sake, you come back safely for me." Then he couldn't help but lower his voice and say, "There are so many powerful people. Don't try to show off. Actually, you're injured and shouldn't have gone at all. With so many people, it's not a big deal to lose you. How about we talk to Teacher Meng?" Ziye was still waiting to say more, but Ziye waved his hand and stopped him. His face turned rare and serious. He glanced at Ziye and suddenly said, "Actually, I'm worried about you. If you stay here, you may not necessarily be safe. 2 days. We only have 2 days. If we can't find a safe exit, we can't find a rescue team." Ziye suddenly stopped talking, just because of the consequences. It was chilling. "I won't say it anymore. Anyway, you stay here honestly for a few days. I will definitely come back in a few days. It's agreed, you know, little girl." After speaking, Ziye's face returned to an indifferent expression. "Okay, Ziye, remember, I won't let you break the promise." Ziye was very serious, even gritting his teeth. Ziye turned around with a smile and shook his left hand behind his head, saying, "Got it, Ziye, you're so talkative. Be careful no man dares to marry you." Ziye's face turned red with anger once again. "You, be careful." Suddenly, a gentle voice came from the other side. Ziye's gaze swept and he saw that not far away, Qin Jiague was clasping his fingers tightly with a beautiful girl with big eyes. The girl concealed her worried expression and whispered to Qin Jiague. Ziye recognized the beautiful girl with big eyes as Qin Jiague's girlfriend, who was the class monitor of their current computer class. Suyu remembered that her name should be Yuan Nipping. 6 green-skinned monsters have gathered outside the huge iron gate, constantly waving their wooden sticks and bombarding the gate with a loud boom sound. Fortunately, this iron gate, made of iron pillars with arms thick, is very sturdy and not easily destroyed by brute force. Watching a group of humans gathered behind the iron gate, these green-skinned monsters kept emitting sharp howls, seeming very excited. "Are you ready?" A teacher nervously grabbed the small iron handle next to the giant iron door, which was locked with a giant iron lock. The other hand of the teacher was holding the key to the lock, but it was trembling all the time. Everyone present quieted down, and a dozen or so people with supernatural powers squeezed forward. One of them, a student with a flat head and a height of about 1.8 meters, took 2 steps forward. Although he was about the same age as Suyu, he had a calm and composed expression beyond his age, and said, "Teacher, give me the key." The teacher nodded, handed him the key to unlock, and then returned it. Once the iron gate is opened, these green-skinned monsters will rush in. Without killing these green-skinned monsters, they will never be able to leave here. The student with a flat head took the key, holding a wooden stick left by the green-skinned monster in his right hand and extending it in his left hand. Without further hesitation, he stuck and opened the iron lock. Following closely behind him were Jague, Zhang Zhongmo, and another student whom Suyu did not know, followed by Suyu, Ning Yan, Ma Zai, and others. The 13 people at the forefront are all psychics, followed by a group of 18 ordinary people composed of teachers, security guards, and other students. Together, they make up a total of 30.1 people, making up the entire team for this time. Dean Zheng and some school leaders, teachers and professors such as Meng Bo, as well as groups of male and female students such as Su Yu and Lei Rui, are all watching with a cold sweat in their palms. The first time a green-skinned monster attacked, everyone was only focused on running for their lives. At this moment, everyone could barely calm down and watch as a group of people were about to fight against a group of monsters, which was a mixture of various complex emotions such as tension, fear, excitement, and so on. Bang and bang kept making loud noises, while the green monster outside continued to knock on the iron door. The short-haired boy with a flat head quickly lifted the already opened iron lock with his left hand, pulled the door handle again, and headed back to the area. With a soft bang, the small door next to the giant iron door opened. Seeking collection and recommendation tickets, end of this chapter. Chapter 7. Towards the Forest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 8. The Power of Ma Zai. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. The Power of Ma Zai in the forest. Towering trees grow one after another, with lush branches and leaves that block the light, making the surroundings appear very dark. The sky was shrouded in dark clouds, with a low pressure that seemed indescribable. Among the large trees, there were various unnamed weeds and shrubs that were as tall as a person. A group of 30 people, including Su Yu, Zhang Zhongmo, Qin Jiague, Ning Yan, and Ma Zai, held wooden sticks, police batons, or baseball bats in their hands, and struggled to penetrate into the forest through the weeds and horizontally extending branches and leaves. Unexpectedly, they walked less than a few hundred meters, and suddenly a rustling sound echoed around them. Suddenly, Su Yu and 30 others stopped and, without warning, a group of green-skinned monsters emerged from the weeds and shrubs that were over 1 person tall around them, surrounding them in groups. Ah! Someone couldn't help but scream in surprise. In the 30-person team, there was a commotion, and suddenly so many green-skinned monsters emerged, causing everyone's heart to jump wildly in fear. At a glance, Su Yu noticed that there were at least a dozen green-skinned monsters, giving them almost no room for thought. These green-skinned monsters let out sharp growls from their mouths and rushed towards them from all around. "Only 15, only half of us, there's nothing to be afraid of." Suddenly, a woman's voice sounded with a hint of indifference, and then Suyu saw Ma Ziye from the foreign language department rush out first. Among the 12 individuals in this group who possess supernatural powers, besides Suyu, Ma Ziye has killed the most green-skinned monsters. It is said that her family owns a martial arts school and has a considerable foundation in martial arts. Suyu saw her charging out with each step, and her posture was indeed somewhat different from the movements of ordinary people. Without much time to think, the green-skinned monster waved its wooden stick and rushed towards him. In a critical moment, Suyu ignored the burning pain in his right shoulder and threw his left hand at a green-skinned monster. On the back of his hand, 4 black scales appeared, and there was a surge of abnormal force in his left arm. Suyu's current strength was almost 4 times that of a green-skinned monster. With just one swing, he smashed the green-skinned monster that was rushing towards him, kicking and kicking back more than 10 steps, and then sat down on the ground. Even a simple-minded green-skinned monster, with an ugly face, showed a hint of horror. Ah! Roar! 2 screams came from the other side, and Suyu couldn't help but turn his head. He saw 2 people falling to the ground, hit by wooden sticks on their bodies, and their flesh and blood were flying everywhere, unable to survive. Qin Jiague drank fiercely, gripping the wooden stick tightly with both hands and smashing it heavily. It collided with the wooden stick of a green-skinned monster, causing a muffled groan in the air. The footsteps of both sides floated, and they were evenly matched. Another tall man saw the opportunity to catch up and hit the back of the green monster's head with a stick. The green-skinned monster roared in pain, waved its back, and hit the man with a loud thud. This tall man is a physical education teacher in school. He is strong, but after being hit by a green-skinned monster, his sternum was completely shattered, his chest sank in, and blood seeped from his mouth, nostrils, and ears. He opened his mouth wide and took a few steps back, as if wanting to say something. He was then hit by another green-skinned monster in the back of his head, causing blood to splatter in his brain to spray out, resulting in his immediate death. Su Yugang swung away a green-skinned monster and turned his head to see the miserable situation, feeling heartbroken. This is the teacher who teaches them physical education. He is very humorous and often jokes with the boys in their class. He doesn't have much of a teacher's airs, and although the 2 sides may not have a deep friendship, they are also very familiar. Seeing his tragic death now, Suyu instinctively took a step and hit the green-skinned monster with several sticks in a row. The green-skinned monster swung its stick to block it, but unexpectedly, the stick in its hand was touched by Suyu's wooden stick, and it flew out. Suyu then collected all the sticks, sinking his head and chest, and dying even more tragically than the physical education teacher. The other green-skinned monster, which was hit by Suyu, was about to struggle to get up when it was surrounded by 2 students holding a baseball bat. Although they didn't have any special strength, they wildly swung their bat and hit the fallen green-skinned monster, splashing green juice. Soon, one of the students seemed to be looking at their right hand, but strange black silk-like spots appeared on the back of their right hand. The green-skinned monster on the ground had been killed by their joint efforts, and the final fatal blow belonged to this student. However, the black crystals inside the green-skinned monster were absorbed by his right hand, and this student finally became a new psychic. Blood splattered and screamed incessantly in the field, including those from teachers and students, as well as sharp screams from green-skinned monsters. Occasionally, people or green-skinned monsters fell down. Qin Jiague suddenly let out a loud scream, and the wooden stick in his hand and the wooden stick in the hand of the green-skinned monster he was facing flew out together, and then his 2 bodies rolled together. Die! Qin Jiague drank fiercely, his right arm tightly twisting the neck of the green-skinned monster, and the monster's claws grabbed him, causing him to scream in pain and bleeding from the chest. The strange force in the right arm continued to flow, and the force grew stronger and stronger. With a crisp sound, the neck of the green-skinned monster was finally twisted by him. When another green-skinned monster was hit by Suyu's stick and flew out diagonally like dry grass, the total number of green-skinned monsters that died in his hands from yesterday to today exceeded 10. Gradually, he learned some experience in dealing with this green-skinned monster. After possessing several times the power of the green-skinned monster, the group of terrifying green-skinned monsters in front of Suyu suddenly became somewhat vulnerable in his eyes. On the back of his left hand, a fifth black scale had already appeared, and most of the 15 green-skinned monsters were dead. Suyu waved his wooden stick and smashed it open, using several times the strength of the opponent. He could easily crack the tiger's mouth, causing the opponent's wooden stick to slip away. He then took advantage of the opponent's retreat and stepped forward to bully him, then swung his stick and hit him, causing his head to break and his brain to burst. With this series of actions, in just 1 or 2 seconds, you can defeat a green-skinned monster. Unconsciously, everyone else stopped and watched as Suyu hung his right hand on his chest, swung his stick with only one left hand, and lured into the midst of the green-skinned monster, exuding a sense of invincibility. A coquettish scolding sounded before pulling everyone back to their senses. However, the foreign language department's Ma Ziye took a cut and suddenly stood up, kicking a green-skinned monster in the heart with terrifying force. The green-skinned monster let out a sharp scream and flipped out heavily. Qin Jiague had just twisted the neck of a green-skinned monster and felt a stronger force surging in his right arm. On the back of his right palm, the black metallic plaque had also become the size of a nail plate. Seeing Ma Ziye's performance, he muttered to himself, "So her force is on her right foot." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Disputes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Disputes. After Suyu killed the last green-skinned monster, the wooden stick in his hand was covered in green juice. Looking back, he saw that the entire army of green-skinned monsters had been ambushed in this battle, while only 4 people died and about 7 or 8 were injured, all of whom were dressing and cleaning their wounds. Suyu alone defeated 7 green-skinned monsters, and his brilliant achievements were impressive. Even Ning Yan, who had almost never interacted with Suyu, couldn't help but glance at him. Ha! Zhang Zhongmo sat on the ground, took out a cigarette from his pocket, and took a deep breath with his hands soaked in green juice. In front of him, there was a green-skinned monster lying on the ground with its head almost smashed. The monster had a rotten watermelon-like head and a wooden stick stuck in it. This stick belonged to Zhang Zhongmo, and obviously, he had just killed a green-skinned monster. "Brother, do you smoke?" Zhang Zhongmo exhaled a mouthful of smoke and shouted as he looked at Suyu. Suyu walked slowly over and shook his head. Although he had just killed 7 green-skinned monsters in a row, his supernatural powers became even stronger, and even due to the reason why his supernatural powers became stronger, his recovery speed from injuries in other parts of his body became faster. However, Suyu couldn't feel any excitement. Just now, 4 more people died, especially the scene of the familiar physical education teacher's tragic death in front of him, which made Suyu's heart tremble. What about their bodies? One of the tall and sturdy students with a flat head took a sip of mineral water from his backpack, wiped his mouth, and said. The duration of the first battle was not long, and although it was a complete victory, many people were injured to some extent. At this moment, they stopped in place, bandaged their wounds, and took the opportunity to rest. There were also a few green-skinned monsters who had just killed their first lives. They had transformed from ordinary people to those with supernatural powers, and their faces were both excited and shocked, feeling the fluctuation of supernatural forces inside. A man in his 30s, wearing a security suit and holding a baton, looked up at the sky with a solemn expression and said, "In this place, no one knows what will happen next. The most important thing for us now is to find a source of food and a rescue team. Time is tight, and these bodies can only be thrown here." Qin Jiague was seriously injured in World War I just now, and his chest was covered in his own blood. With the help of another student, he was treating the wound. After hearing the words of the school security guard, he raised his head and said, "How can we do this? If we leave it here, we may soon be eaten by other green-skinned monsters. This is not possible. Suddenly, he clenched his fists and stood up. The school security guard frowned slightly and said, "Do we still need to dig a pit to bury them? Remember, we only have 2 days of food in total, and we don't have time to deal with these corpses." Chin Jiague stared at him and said, "Have you ever thought, maybe it's your or my turn to fall here soon? Do you want your body to be eaten by those monsters?" The school security guard was furious and shouted, "What are you saying? Are you cursing me to death?" He suddenly grabbed the baton in his hand. The two suddenly had a conflict, and everyone's gaze fell on them. Zhang Zhongmo quickly stood up and blocked the way between them. He opened his mouth and said, "Smoking. Come on, take a cigarette alone. What's there to argue about?" The school security guard coldly pushed away Zhang Zhongmo's hand and stared at Chin Jiague in front of him without any hesitation, saying, "Kid, haven't your parents taught you to respect your elders? All I think is for everyone's sake. Remember, there are still over 1,000 people waiting for our news in the school. Should we waste our time on such an event?" Chin Jiague said in a deep voice, "You don't even respect the deceased, why should I respect you?" "You," the school security guard shouted angrily, wanting to take action. Su Yu, who was originally twisting his hair as if he was thinking something, saw that there was really a conflict between the two sides and quickly took a step to block him. Su Yu suddenly appeared, and the school security guard instinctively took a breath, but the baton couldn't be pulled down. Since this strange incident occurred, Su Yu's performance has been too eye-catching. Unconsciously, everyone has developed an inexplicable sense of awe towards him, even the school security guard is no exception. I won't say the big truth either, it's just everyone is a group of partners formed for the same purpose, and what you're saying makes sense. This land is really solid, and we don't have tools to carry on our hands. If we want to dig a big pit, it may take us half a day. We really don't have time to spend here, otherwise. Su Yu pondered slightly, pinched his hair, and then continued, "Let's move the bodies onto this branch and put them away. Let those green-skinned monsters not destroy their bodies. It's not too late for us to bury them properly when we find the rescue team back. As long as it doesn't take much time, I don't have any objections." The school security guard heard that they just moved the body to a tree, but they agreed because it wouldn't take much time. Upon hearing Su Yu's words, Tai Jiague knew that what he was saying was true. Given their current situation, it would take them half a day to dig a large pit that could bury a few people without any manual digging tools. However, they only had 2 days to make use of, and now that most of the morning has passed, it can be said that time is tight. Su Yu said to do it, and Zhang Zhongmo, Chin Jiague, and others picked up the body together, preparing to move it to the top of a big tree and put it away to avoid being damaged by other monsters. "I'll help too," said the tall and muscular young man with a flat head. Zhang Zhongmo asked his name, and only then did he know that he was 1 year older than them, named Zhao Shichang, who was their senior. "Put the body away and let's go," the school security guard continued. "The smell of blood here is very strong, and he really doesn't want to stay here any longer." For corpses were soon placed one by one on the dense branches of the towering tree, and Zhang Zhongmo jumped off the branches. "All right, everyone keep going." The school security guard saw that among the outstanding people, he was the oldest. Unconsciously, he had already regarded himself as the leader of everyone, and he wanted to lead this team well. Zhang Zhongmo gave him a sidelong glance, obviously not paying much attention, and lazily said, "Have everyone rested?" The school security guard glared at him and wanted to say something. Suddenly, he realized it and looked to the other side. Su Yu noticed it earlier than him, grabbed the wooden stick with his left hand, and stood up. The faint sound of rustling echoed from a patch of bushes on the other side, and everyone looked over. Then, they saw the bushes being separated and a green-skinned monster walking out. Although they are both green-skinned monsters, the head green-skinned monster in front of them is not the same as the green-skinned monster they have been encountering all along. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Terrifying Green Skin Monster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Terrifying Green Skin Monster, Seeking, Collecting, and Recommending Tickets. The green-skinned monster I used to encounter had a short stature, just like a 14-year-old human child. In front of me, the green-skinned monster was at least 1.8 meters tall, and compared to others, it appeared to be tall. Its green muscles were swollen, and there were dense black hair growing on top of it. With empty hands, only a pair of claws were 7 or 8 centimeters long, emitting a bright black light. There's another monster. Quickly, everyone reacted and most of the people who were sitting and resting stood up. The two people closest to the monster immediately rushed forward, one on the left and the other on the right. Now they know that killing the green skin monster can give them stronger power. Although the green skin monster in front of them is very large, it is only alone and not enough to be afraid. However, they have just killed a green skin monster with powerful supernatural powers, and they are eager to take action, wanting to kill another one first. Be careful. Ziye instinctively felt something was wrong. The large green-skinned monster in front of him, with its tightly closed mouth, gave him a completely different feeling and pressure. Die. The person on the left clasped his wooden stick in both hands and smashed the head of the large green-skinned monster facing him. The other person is more clever, with a slightly shorter body, but they hit it on the leg. In his calculations, it is difficult to hit the head directly, but if he manages to hit it with this blow, he can make it fall all at once, and then take the opportunity to make up for it with another blow, which will definitely save its life. This large green-skinned monster stared at the corpses of the green-skinned monsters on the ground, with a strange faint blood-red glow in its eyes. It walked up step by step, and in an instant, it made contact with the two people, reaching out and waving its hands. A silk sound sounded, which was very strange, like the sound of tearing open a piece of cowhide with brute force or cutting through thick flesh with a knife. The two people who rushed forward didn't even have time to scream, so their bodies twisted and fell out in an instant. After landing, they only made a few gurgling sounds in their mouths, but nothing could be heard. Blood gushed from their necks. At the moment of contact, this large green-skinned monster waved its hands, and its sharp black and shiny fingers were like two small knives, cutting almost the entire necks of these two people. The throat was broken, blood spurted out like a fountain, and when I inhaled, I made a gurgling sound. My whole body kept twitching and trembling, but soon this twitching stopped and I had lost my life. Ziye, Zhang Zhongmo, Qin Jiague, Ma Zai, Zhao Shichang, and others all took a deep breath of air conditioning. This large monster suddenly emerged and killed two people with just one face. After being stunned for half a second, everyone suddenly came to their senses. Ah! Someone shouted sternly as they retreated, feeling a surge of fear in their hearts. However, more people rushed forward, relying on the large number of people, hoping to surround the monster and launch a group attack. With a flash of green shadow, the monster disappeared in front of everyone, and then a scream sounded from the other side. Everyone looked in shock, only to see the school security guard who had just clashed with Qin Jiague being grabbed by it and lifted up by one arm and one thigh. The school security guard didn't even understand what was going on, only felt a flash in his eyes, pain in his arms and legs, and then spun around, his body lifted off the ground by this monster. After understanding what was going on, the school security guard screamed frantically, "Help me. I can't die. I have a child, my child is only 3 years old, he needs me, help me." His face twisted, filled with madness and fear, his whole body struggling and wriggling, but he felt his arms and thighs trapped by 1,000 pounds of steel, unable to break free. With a hiss sound, blood spurted out, and the school security guard's screams turned into screams. One arm was forcefully torn off by the green skin monster. "Stop it." Ziye drank fiercely, holding a stick in his left hand. After a slight daze, he was the first to react and charge forward. The figure beside him flashed, and the strange force of Ma Ziye was in his right leg, faster than him, instantly surpassing him. With a wave of the wooden stick, he threw it at the green-skinned monster. Using a wooden stick to distract the opponent's attention, Ma Ziye twisted her body, bounced her legs, and suddenly, leaned against the ground and shoved it out. One leg was whipped like a whip. This is exactly the whip leg in martial arts. With the powerful power in her leg, if this monster is kicked by her, it will definitely fall. But Ziye only rushed up half a second later than her. Following closely behind Ziye, people with supernatural powers such as Qin Jigui, Zhang Zhongmo, and Zhao Shichang rushed forward. Although Qin Jigui had a conflict with the security guard of this school just now, it is not the time to remember this personal grudge. This monster is too powerful. If everyone cannot join forces and be defeated by it one by one, we are afraid that everyone will die without a place to bury themselves. This large green-skinned monster still stood in place, only grabbing the school security guard who was howling wildly after it had torn off one arm, and suddenly used it as a weapon to hit Ma Ziye who was leaning towards it. Ma Ziye groaned. His whip leg was too fast and fierce, and he couldn't hold back. He was immediately hit by the school security guard, and with a muffled groan, blood seeped from the corner of his mouth, causing two figures to fly backwards. The green shadow flickered, and the green-skinned monster kicked its feet before finally moving. It followed closely behind the school security guard thrown by it and pounced, with a single paw extended. With a hissing sound, the paw penetrated into the back of the school security guard, splattering fresh blood. The school security guard let out a mournful scream, and his body was pierced by its paw, leaving a blood hole that did not weaken. It also threatened to pierce Ma Ziye's body and string the two of them together on his own arm. Later, Ziye's mind was greatly shaken. Seeing the danger, he couldn't catch up and let out a fierce roar. Black scales appeared on his left back, and he threw the wooden stick in his hand. With all his might, the wooden stick whizzed in the air with a terrifying throwing force, making it shoot faster than expected. The green-skinned monster heard such a strange and piercing wind howl in its ears, and for the first time, it slightly moved and turned its head, but it didn't have time to dodge. With a loud bang, the wooden stick hit its back heavily. With a muffled groan, the force of the wooden stick's strike was extremely terrifying. Even stronger than this green-skinned monster, it let out a roar in pain, and the sound of bone fractures echoed inside, causing its body to fall diagonally out. Up. The others saw the opportunity and rushed forward with fierce shouts. Ziye had just exerted too much force with a single blow, and there was a faint tearing pain in his chest. He had to stop in place, take a breath, and then recover. He was busy picking up a wooden stick from the ground and catching up. The green-skinned monster was hit by Ziye, flipped over heavily and fell out. Its claws were also pulled out of the school security guard's body. The school security guard's body fell to the ground, revealing a bloody and terrifying hole in his chest and back, his heart exposed, and he was already close to death. His eyes turned white, and his remaining arm twisted slightly, as if he wanted to grab something before he died. He murmured, "How? How? Dad. Dad. I'm going home now. To accompany you. Dad will come out of the forest. Soon. I'll go home." In the end, the voice became silent, and the palm tightly grasped a clump of weeds as if trying to climb up, but life had left him forever. End of this chapter.